Hello, I'm Scott Robison. Just wanted to talk a little bit tonight about my thoughts on federal issues. I posted a snarky tweet tonight that was forwarded to Facebook, my Facebook account, about a negative thing about Trump. What it was really doesn't matter. But somebody, a member of my family, raised the honest and legitimate question, you're constantly bashing Trump, but I don't see you coming up with viable alternatives. And that's true. One reason is that these are tweets. It's 140 characters. It's really not conducive to an in-depth analysis and policy proposals for national issues. Another reason is that I'm not running for president. Nobody cares what I think. Well, a few people might care what I think, but by and large, people don't think what I think matters. A third point is that, I think trying to convince people that Trump is not worthy of their support, endorsement, and influence is a viable idea to fix things, because I think a system that nominates Trump to be president is a broken system. It needs to be fixed. And so if I can encourage friends and family, my acquaintances, to reevaluate potential support for Donald Trump, I think I'm doing a viable thing to try to make things better. I've also posted a number of things online in the past and on the air that do propose or encourage viable policies. I've been doing this for years before there was a Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. Now, I'm not a popular personality online. Nobody, for the most part, cares what I have to say on a societal basis. But I do think that many of my friends and family could testify to the fact that I bore them to tears with these sorts of thoughts and conversations frequently. Now, I can't judge what this family member thinks is viable or what you think is viable, but here are some things that I have expressed in the past. It's not an exhaustive list, but it is things that I have talked about. One, in my opinion, Trump seems ignorant of reality and is just really good at spouting sound bites that appeal to a certain segment of the electorate. Now, if we just ignore that for a moment and give Trump the benefit of the doubt that he really isn't ignorant and is in fact quite knowledgeable, Trump does not have the attitude or temperament of someone I personally want leading the free world. Now, as much as I don't care for Trump, I don't blame people for being frustrated with the GOP leadership. They've been failing to live up to their promises for years. Now, I'll admit, many of those promises that they have failed to achieve have been impossible. They couldn't do it if they wanted to. Some might give them a pass for not achieving the impossible promises. I blame them for making promises in the first place that they knew were impossible. Alternatively, maybe they didn't know that these promises were impossible. In that case, I fault them for not knowing that the promises were impossible to begin with. Either way, the GOP leadership is almost single-handedly responsible for creating an environment that allowed the ultimate demagogue, Trump, to achieve the success that he has had this primary season. In as much as, you can call an inability to get a majority of popular support from your own party success. In 2012, Romney had about 53% of the popular vote in the primaries. 2008, McCain had 47%. Bush in 2000, 62%. Dole had 58%. Bush Sr., 72% and 67%, his two times. Reagan had 59% in 1980. Ford had 53%. Nixon in 1972 had 86%. Now, his 1968 percentage wasn't very good. But in 2016, Trump, 41%. You have to go all the way back to 1968, almost 50 years, to find a political party nominee in the GOP that did worse and wound up winning the nomination of his party. Now, I am convinced, although I cannot prove, that Trump has only been as successful as he has because of a split electorate. With so many people running for the GOP nomination, well, there was 17, I think, total. The mainstream vote was split 16 ways. So here's another viable suggestion, I think, that would be directed directly at state political parties. When you hold a primary, do not award winner-take-all delegates for a simple plurality or even a small majority. As much as Trump has complained about states where he didn't get any delegates despite getting a sizable portion of the vote, he has been the benefactor of those rules more often than not. Here's another thing. In the Electoral College, states should not be winner-take-all. I think the way that Maine and Nebraska do it, their model would be better, where electors are apportioned both statewide and by congressional district. On ballots, there should not be a straight party voting option on ballots because it supports ill-informed voters. People should be voting for candidates, not parties. There should not be political party affiliations listed next to a candidate's name because it supports ill-informed voters. If you want to vote exclusively for members of a certain party, you should look up their names in advance of entering the polling booth. Again, so that we are not supporting ill-informed voters, there should not be incumbency status listed on a ballot. No vote should be decided by a plurality. We should implement some form of instant runoff voting to ensure that the winner has the support of a majority of the voters, of the electorate. General mail-in voting and early in-person voting are not good because, again, they support the casting of ill-informed votes. Now, I'm not saying there's never a case for mail-in ballots or maybe early voting. For example, absentee ballots, I think, are legitimate. Some people have health issues that might keep them from getting to their polling place on election day. I'm all for reasonable exceptions, but the direction we're going of making more and more elections 100% all mail-in means that people can just check out of the campaign process completely. Weeks in advance, before all the information is known, they can write down their vote, they can put it into an envelope, put a stamp on it. Actually, I don't think they even need to put a stamp on it. These are prepaid things. Mail it in. I'm all for everybody who wants to cast a considered vote doing so. I am not for encouraging people to vote because it's their civic duty, even though they don't really have an interest in it. We should not be shaming people into voting. And if you do cast an early vote or a mail-in vote, and the day before the election, there's some bit of news hits that, all of a sudden your candidate, the guy that you supported, you discovered has murdered 83 children coast to coast over the last 40 years, too late. You've already voted for the serial child killer. So our predominantly two-party system, onto another point, has kind of rigged the system to make third-party challenges all but impossible. Ballot access needs to be fair and equitable. Now, let's talk about a few things that have been topics of conversation during this campaign season. Immigration. I'm not necessarily opposed to a wall separating countries, but I'm not so naive as to think that a wall is going to magically fix everything 100%. We'll never have another illegal immigrant if we just build a wall. What we really need is to come down hard on people who encourage illegal immigration and benefit from illegal immigration. And by encourage and benefit from, I'm talking about companies that are able to hire illegal immigrants at sub-market wages. If that opportunity was not here, people would not be wanting to immigrate illegally. As for taxation, if we must have an income tax, and I'm not convinced we need an income tax, but if we must have an income tax, it should be a flat tax. One rate applied to all taxable income. Taxable income should be income in excess of a generous standard deduction and personal exemption. I don't know the exact numbers. I don't know what the rate should be. I don't know what the exemptions should be. I don't know what the deduction should be. But there's some combination of those numbers that would generate the revenue necessary to run the federal government, and that would be it. And it would be simple, and people wouldn't need advanced doctorate degrees in math and economics and astral projection and whatever else they might need in order to fill out their taxes these days. The fair tax is also an interesting concept, but I personally see it creating more problems than it solves. But I think I would find the fair tax a better alternative to what we have today. Campaign finances. There are all sorts of crazy rules and laws that are in place to restrict direct campaign contributions. And contributions. You can't contribute and you can't contribute. Neither of those. Anyway, how about you as an individual can donate to a campaign if you're eligible to register to vote or if you're a citizen. You can donate up to the federal gift limit each year, and you can donate more than that if you wish, but it will be taxed just like any other gift. Healthcare reform. A huge part of the reason that healthcare is so expensive is directly due to federal government involvement. If you look back in history to when Medicare was implemented in the mid-60s and when Medicaid was implemented a few years later, you see this huge growth curve on healthcare costs in this country. And a big part of budget deficits that we have had, especially in the 70s, was because people could not forecast accurately just how expensive Medicare was really going to be. Whenever money is pumped into some sector of the economy, businesses will race to get a piece of that money. Rather than continually piling more and more laws on to try to fix the broken policies, procedures, and laws that have been in place before, how about if we just get out of the system as much as possible, make it competitive, don't spend trillions of dollars of tax revenue or borrowed money, which is really just future tax revenue, on one of the largest corporate welfare schemes in history. It's not that all people in healthcare and health insurance are bad, but bad actors that are attracted to this system are definitely a problem. The cost of education, higher education in this country. Again, let's not double down tax money towards education. Education costs have increased because the cost of money to get an education is artificially low, with government subsidized rates and such. This drives up the number of people seeking education, increased demand, and the supply of admissions slots in colleges is inadequate for that demand, inadequate supply. Also, just like with healthcare, government involvement in education attracts bad actors. Like there are a number of for-profit private colleges that exist not to give people an education or a useful degree, but they exist to encourage students to get student loans or other government funds, which they can then profit from. And they do only the most trivial bit of effort at actually giving the student an education. Now, it's not that all for-profit schools are bad, but there are definitely bad ones out there. One that comes to mind, Trump University. From everything that we've heard, Trump University is a perfect example of the problem, which brings us back around to Trump. So, At this point, I've spent way too much time talking about this. I mean, I don't think so, but nobody is left watching this at this point. But these are just some of the things I've talked about in the past that I think would make things better for a lot of people. Unfortunately, I'm not running for president, so nobody really cares what I think. But if you care and you think some of these ideas are good, maybe you could share them with other people. You don't even have to share this video with people. Just share the thoughts. Claim them as your own. I don't really care. I would just like to see good things happen. If you would like my opinion on some issue that I didn't address above, because obviously there's a lot out there, and this is just a few minutes of me rambling about things. If you would like to know what I think on some other subject, ask away. Leave a comment, send me a message. I'll be happy to either respond in writing or record another video if it's worth it. But just feel free to ask. In any case, thank you for taking your time to watch this. Until next time, take care.